Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Corruption, Crime, and Compliance. And we're checking in with our technology guru, Christian Focacci, who is the head of Threat Digital. And Christian, or Chris, it's so great to have you. We usually have you once a year just to give us what's going on in the tech world and due diligence. And here we have, the timing is perfect to talk about AI and due diligence. But first off, welcome. It's great to have you, and always good to touch base with you.
Absolutely, great to be here.
Chris, do me a favor, and for new listeners who don't know you or whatever, I met you years ago at a steel vendor or steel customer type of event. Anyways, but tell us about Threat Digital, what you're doing there. I can vouch for it. We use it in our practice, and it's just a terrific, terrific tool. And I urge everybody to take a look at it. Threat Digital. But go ahead. What's going on these days?
So, for people who don't know, we've been around about 3 years, which is a relatively short time as a company, but we've been using generative AI and large language models from the start. So, we probably have the most experience of applying that technology to the corruption and bribery space or anti-corruption and bribery space, due diligence research, anti-money laundering. Before founding this company, though, I've spent about 20 years in the AML, KYC, and FCPA space as a compliance officer, investigator, researcher. So I kind of have a trajectory of working in the weeds to then building technology to solve the problems. And it's just great to be here and kind of have a candid conversation about AI and what we're seeing in the world. And this, I think, like you said, it's a yearly conversation, starting probably. I think we talked in 2019 before even ChatGPT came out, and one of my predictions was, "Hey, check out this OpenAI. It's something
That,
that's going to be
yeah,
important in the future."
I'll never forget that. You did say that. And we were just talking about generative AI at that point, and not in terms of, you know, Chat GPT uh, or Claude or whatever it is. Um, from my perspective, what we're seeing is something that is akin, in terms of my views, to the internet in revolutionizing the world like the internet did. But this one, now that we're dealing with AI, tell me, like, what's your view and how's it impacting, the bread and butter work that people are doing with regard to due diligence, with regard to data, large data sets, and investigations of, let's say, beneficial ownership and other things like that.
So the big change has been there's a few changes with the technology itself, but then also the acceptance of technology. So when we first started talking, say in 2023, the conversation was just what is this? What are large
Right.
language models? How they work, right? And there was a lot of education involved. Then it started to get some traction, especially at the executive level, where there was investment in that. What we've seen now at this point is though companies are now starting to understand what works and what doesn't work, and how to proceed forward with that. A lot of time and effort was invested for companies to be up to date on having Claude or OpenAI or whoever they have as a general chat model, and there's some use cases on that, but a lot of companies are realizing they didn't necessarily get the lift they thought of just giving everyone ChatGPT, and it makes sense why that happened. So what we're really starting to see now is what solutions are getting traction, what works, what doesn't work in the industry, or across the board, not just our industry, really all industries. They're starting to understand that it's not going away. They're understanding how to implement it, and they want to implement it more to improve efficiencies, improve processes, and things like that. Where for a while it was really very hypey, right? Like, okay, we need to do this, but what is it? And we just have to apply, and we're going to have a chat bot or something like that.
Right. Right. But you know what I see, Chris, is the business, there's been so much hype around it that the business is pushing it. And I'll give you an example. The worst communications I've ever heard from a CEO. A CEO to his C-suite uh, folks issues a directive. Tell me how many people we can cut from your department and what you're going to be doing with AI. And that's it. Not let's talk about what are the use cases, what are the upsides and the downsides, what are the risks, and looking through this on a serious step by step basis. There's almost a hysteria where the business is way out in front, or the leadership is way out in front of what actually can be done and is happening on the ground. And compliance people are scratching their heads saying, whoa, wait for us, because you've got risks here as well. So this hype, I think, is running out of gas, is what I'm starting to see. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I'm not the kind of first to acknowledge it. I think a lot of the AI is kind of a fig leaf on overhiring. So I think most of the things we saw, especially early this year, where we had a lot of cuts, I think the low interest rates of 2021, companies
Right.
were hiring like crazy, and I think there's been some kind of correction, and AI is kind of the boogeyman that the CEOs are using, whether they actually believe it or they hope to believe it or they're slightly delusional. Um, but I think that's what you see, that adjustment. The AI, from everything I've seen, especially when they're tracking like kind of AI and job growth. And there was a study just out of Stanford. It compared jobs that were highly impacted by AI or potential to be to jobs that AI wasn't going to impact at all. And the jobs that aren't supposed to be impacted at all by AI grew slightly more than the AI jobs, but it wasn't significantly more. So you're still seeing some kind of job growth. So I think that's kind of just a correction, and they just blame AI. But yeah, you're absolutely right in that. Like, there's the hype cycle and bubbles, and those are real things. And then there's the technology itself that is progressing, right? Is the bubble and the hype cycle connected? It's tough to, or the hype cycle and the technology growth actually connected? It's tough to know, and probably not. There's obviously going to be some kind of bubble. But just within the last year, like the things we talked about a year ago, where what's going to happen, it's like context windows were getting really big, like real technical stuff
Right.
is changing. So that has happened. Things that we've seen since last year, November of 2025, we've seen a significant improvement in the reasoning ability of models across the board. So we had Anthropic, OpenAI come out with the ChatGPT, GPT 5.1, the newer Claude models, and now the Fable models. Like, there's been a measurable improvement in model capability since November of last year. That is 100% measurable and real. We've also seen the biggest change of the last year, and something we've seen in our practice even before that, is the tooling around AI has gotten better. Because if you think of it, like when people say AI, they're talking about the model, and the model is almost like an engine, right? It's a
Right.
engine, something that powers things, and that's good. It's a lot of stuff it could do, right? And like the frontier companies will make a car and they'll put the engine in it, right? But there's a lot of other applications for this engine. So what we're seeing over the last years, everyone's talking about agentic AI, and that's fine, right? But it's not so much agentic; it's more of the software that the AI fits in has matured for different industries and different use cases, right? Like, maybe the right application for that engine is not a car; maybe it's a pump to do something else, like to pump out, water from mines or whatever. It's a hypothetical. So what we've seen is a lot of more maturity around how the AI is implemented in business use cases, and that's software engineering meeting the AI models. The models are improving. They call it the harnesses that the kind of the models fit in, and you see that a lot of coding. The coding harnesses improved. So over the last year, there's been like really big improvements on how people are accessing AI, its capabilities, um, which is
Does
separate
that
from.
but does that also get to the issue of what I've noticed is, there's other software that I use for my business, and they say, okay, well, we can integrate through API from Anthropic or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? In other words, bringing it into other platforms, or are you talking about more product specific to, let's say, your use of Claude or your use of Chat GPT or whatever you use.
Yeah, so it's going to be like use case specific. So even if we just talk about coding, if we don't talk about our industry for a minute,
Right.
when these models first came out, the way you interacted with them early on was you had a chat window like everyone else, and you pop some code into it, right? And
Okay.
then you would ask it questions, and they can output code, and you put it in. Then they slowly integrated those models into your text editor. So it kind of built it so you could work
Ah,
in it. Now there's codecs, there's all of these kind of harnesses that do agentic and they do a lot of steps in this. So all of that software engineering that the model fits in
I
and
got it.
work on
Right.
its. So that's for coding. Coding is kind of a good barometer because people who can write code are like ahead of the other industries because they can make their own tooling. But where you're going to see that tooling happen across all of the different vertical specific industries, right? We work on it on due diligence and third party risk and that kind of thing. So we build tooling that the models fit in that build this whole workflow that the model is just almost like the glue and a lot of it's software engineering because we know the business use case. But
Got
that
it.
where like so it's a combination like the models are getting better but the software the models are fitting in is getting much much better and it's not just a chat window right like that was the first thing everyone deployed oh just put a chat in our application and say we have
Yeah.
AI that might have looked good in a deck but it's kind of didn't help anybody it was a little bit silly.
Yeah. Now, and let me give you an example though of some of the issues I'm seeing. Uh, so we're doing a risk assessment with a company. We're interviewing people, and some of the higher ups, and we're saying, okay, how are you using AI, or what are you anticipating for AI? Well, we don't use AI at this point. Okay, we don't use it, but we're looking at various use cases. Blah blah blah. I meet with the finance people. I say, what do you think about AI? Oh, they go, we're using it. I said, you're using it? This is nobody knows you're. Yeah, we use it all the time. We've been using it for over a year to monitor all of our transactions in the finance for a mega company, billions and billions, and we use it to look for anomalies in the transactions. And so that to me underscored one. First off, we have shadow use all over the place. People are using it because we can use it at home, and you go to work, you're going to use it. Employees are using it without. So there's very little governance structure around AI. But number two, here are like basic functions that I do think AI is incredible at, which is, let's say, monitoring large amounts of data, looking through data for anomalies, all of that, and then flagging those, red flag transactions for a human then to review to make sure everything is okay. But are you seeing what are you seeing in terms of people deploying it, people using it, and what kind of governance structures do we have?
Yeah, we see that a lot. That's funny that it's absolutely the case that there's kind of a shadow IT industry. There are a lot of companies going after that market to try to help companies rein in their governments, and there's a whole industry of companies that are kind of
Wow.
trying to sit in that space. For the larger companies, though, often at this point, they've signed some kind of deal with one of the big AI shops to kind of have an enterprise-wide license across the board, and they all have their preferred vendor, right? Where Copilot, we have our
Right.
own instance of Copilot, we have our own instance of Gemini, and again, usually it's locked down to other things. It's the same with any shadow kind of IT, though, right? Like if they have it locked down,
Right.
they're good at it. If they don't have it locked down, just because it's an AI solution, um, it doesn't mean it's gonna, they're gonna block it. The the scary thing about that is, yeah, everyone interacts with it differently, right? And it's non-deterministic. It's there's like the bit of you're holding it wrong as a tool because you can be right, and
Right.
people's understanding and expectations are all different of how it works, and it makes up information, right? Like that's its job to generate text predictively based on the text it's seen, and you can't if you just think that that's going to work all the time and give you the right answer. It doesn't work that way, right? You need to
Right.
ground AI in information that it can then cite back to you, and that's the only way you can work at it. with it reliably. And even then, you're still going to have some cases where it gets things wrong, right? There's a lot of different classes of it making mistakes. There's pure hallucinations where it just makes up information, right? It makes up, it doesn't, there's no intent, it just predicts the wrong thing, and that's completely
Right.
wrong. But then there's cases where it can read something and it might summarize it incorrectly because it's incomplete, the data it's summarizing. That happens with people too. So there's like a lot of gradation on why it gets things wrong and understanding what you're feeding it, how much of that context does it have, how it interprets it. It's really important when you're kind of working with AI. And then the other bit is math, especially in this case that you mentioned. It's built for language. It just happens to evolve and they tune it so it's better and better at math, but it's not the right tool for doing calculations, right? Like
That's interesting.
the
Yeah.
right tool for that. And this just so happens that it gets it right a lot of the time, but I would not do my accounting with,
Right.
all.
And we already have data analytics programs that are very much more sophisticated that for like transactions, for monitoring transactions and things like that. But you mentioned there another issue, which is, and I bring my sort of narrow legal view towards this. And when I used these tools in the legal area, I was shocked at almost like in Casablanca that there's gambling going on in Rick's Casino. I was shocked by the hallucinations of making up cases. And the danger to me of this is, Chris, that we're it speaks authoritatively and
Yeah.
it sounds like it knows what it's doing. But in fact, I will not rely on any case, anything that it does in the legal area without verifying it for fear of an ethics complaint. Being referred if you do something where you rely on AI for a case. So but if that's true in the legal field, what does that mean in other technical areas? Is it making the same number of mistakes in other areas where that expertise is required?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, it's like reading a newspaper article about like, something about, and you're like,
Right.
it's all incomplete. And then you read something about particle physics and you're like, oh, this is the best article ever. They must know everything. It's
Yeah.
the exact thing.
But how do you guard against that? Because I'm
Well,
worried people are taking this information and then using it authoritatively.
so they are, and even in the legal aspect, for the last 2 or 3 years now, there's been cases where lawyers have cited case law that doesn't exist, and they've had
I
a
know.
it's like a
There's
real thing. Our podcast last year too. If anyone, I'm not going to rehash all of it, but it's worth going back into because we kind of touch on a lot of this context. But from a practical perspective, no kind of nonsense. The only way you can work with generative AI at this point in July 30th, 2027, right? And it's been this way for a while.
right,
You use the AI to review some external context
right,
and have it cite that context. So you can never rely on it to give you a response, and you can't trust that response. It will give you a response, and a lot of times they'll be right. Almost always they'll sound authoritative, but you have no ability to know if that response is accurate or not unless you are feeding it context. And by context, I mean the case law itself, the news articles you want to review,
right,
some tangible piece of information. You use the AI to review that information, and then you provide have the AI give you the type of summary or output that you want with citations back to the specific source of where it found it. And even when it does that, you still need to review that specific source before you make any official judgment on it, right? Even in our solution, we never use the AI to actually generate external links to things.
right.
Those are always hard coded in our application. We use AI a lot, and it reviews news articles and it reviews results and things like that, and it gives you feedback on those. But we always hard code the path from those sources in the citations. So our hallucinations are never, or our citations are never going to be hallucinated because they actually don't come from generative AI. We use the AI to review, and that's the only way it works in our industry. Any industry, if you need a critical decision, you need to have the AI use it as a reviewer of external information versus the source of the information itself. It's the simplest way to say it.
You hit that's exact. And frankly, when I use Threat Digital, one of the things that is so reassuring is that you have citations to the source material itself, not to, so that if I want to double check, I want to read that article that you cite, I can read it. So everything is there in Threat Digital, and it's really actually not just reassuring, but it's interesting to hear how you use AI in that context, because it doesn't replace your citation. It is actually a tool that will get you to a citation, um, and that's the way it should be done. And I think there's a lesson there for everyone, that when you're relying on AI for an original citation of information, you got to be careful. You got to double check it, because that's where we all get in trouble, be it legal, be it any type of writing that you do. And that's one thing that scares me about AI, and that people are just, like, the machine has told me this is okay, so therefore it's okay. And
Yeah.
that is, and if you get it wrong, you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but AI told me this." That
Yeah.
is not a good excuse in
No,
these days.
and to your point on capability, the best kind of analogy I've heard for it is AI at this point is kind of like walking out into a pond, and you think it's really shallow, and then there's a sudden drop off, right?
Right,
And that's
right,
what's happening now, and you see it too. A lot of that's why initial kind of feedback from it's like this is amazing, but then in your case as an expert in a certain industry, is you need to start using it more and more, you hit that drop off, and the thing is, it's very steep. The model's improving, the harness is improving, the data improving, make that drop off further and further, but it's still we still have that, and it's different for every industry, it's different for every use case, and yeah, it's important to know that. And the challenge is, like, there's all the kind of the AI doomers out there, like end of the world kind of stuff. But the real challenge, the biggest fear I have, right, is we're still very early in this process, and we can kind of understand how we're using AI and where it fits in. But more and more things are getting built on it, right? And we're just gonna have AI further in the decision stack of our organizations, in
right.
our lives. And at a certain point, like in our case, okay, we review this information, we cite it, we give it back to you, and you can verify it, right? But then that might trigger another decision, and that's still probably fine. But at a certain point, as these decisions start getting cascaded, and then maybe our decision's fine, but then it's fed to another AI three decisions down the line, having kind of this AI structure all the way down is the thing I'm actually genuinely concerned about, because then at a certain point it's tough to know where did this go wrong, right? Like we know
Right.
the output is, and that's we're going there fast, right? We just keep building more things. So we always try to be like realist on what it does and doesn't do, and also very transparent on how we think we should our users should use it, how they should make decisions, where the AI starts and ends, and that's always clearly labeled. But not everyone is us, right? People are
But
doing different
that's
things.
why when compliance has a role to play here in terms of the governance structure. I'm seeing people using AI without a use policy in place, using AI where the approval for a use case is not, formally done, and people are starting to use it on their own. Um, but I want to tout though, and I want to sort of, change directions in a little bit, because I don't want to be a naysayer of this whole thing.
Yeah,
There are things that it does that can save a lot of time and effort in terms of administrative things. Large data sets and getting through, like what you're saying, analyzing or certain things that would take a lot of time, and you can save time by using AI to work through a lot of data, a lot of information, feeding some, let's say, litigation stuff in, and then getting some responses and an analysis. That can be very, very helpful. Where it exercises discretion is when I get worried, or it starts to act like an expert. But on the other hand, as a first year associate or paralegal, it can do incredibly helpful things, and make people more productive in general. Now, that I think is something that needs to be. integrated more and more, and I think we're going to see economic benefits from that.
Yeah, and I agree. And even to what I mentioned earlier, where you're seeing job growth is not like slightly below like other non-impacted areas. I think that's a big deal because the technology allows so many different things. And what I mean by that is when we saw the internet kind of bubble, we saw job growth spike, right?
Right, right.
But now we haven't seen that spike, but because I think it's letting people do a lot more things. They're getting it done, but we don't need that spike because they're actually becoming more efficiency. So I think there's efficiency is being shown actually in the data, but you have to read it a certain way if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, no, I totally agree with you. And there I see that it's making people more productive. Um, do I think it's going to lead to, okay, you can cut your staff in half? No, it's not going to do that. Do I think it's going to replace everybody? No, I don't think the doomsayers are right in that sense that we're going down this path. I do think the two things that I would say, one, which I would agree with you totally, that we have to be careful how far in our processes we're going to depend upon AI to make a decision. That to me is really where the risk is going to go, because if you're using AI to make certain decisions and you may suffer as a result litigation challenges to those discretionary decisions, you better not be saying we just use AI for that decision. We better have a human involved who knows what they're doing with expertise, and we better document it. Okay. The other thing is, um, I do think that it brings, I don't want it to bring out this sort of overdependence on technology. Technology and humans can work together and do great things together. But here, if we cede too much control to technology or too much of our discretion, or just say, "Oh, let AI do it for us. You got to use this prompt. You got to do this." I think that we have got to recognize its limitations from the get go. And it will always have a limitation in terms of replacing human discretion and expertise.
Yeah, and I think the number one problem is AI can't be held accountable for a decision, but people can,
That's
right?
that's
Like other
exactly right.
factors. So you can't put a computer in a place of making that decision because then there's nothing to blame or anything like that. So I agree. AI is letting us do a lot more as far as data processing, and there's a lot of work that it wasn't busy work. It just took a lot of time to review, right? And in our world, like really specific examples are sanction clearing alerts, right? We take a
Right.
list of names, we clear sanctions, we get hundreds of results that we have to clear. They're mostly false positives. You can have AI go through that and risk rate them and triage them and make recommendations and then give you those results. You still have to have a person kind of look at it and say, okay, this makes sense and sign off on it. Um, but it saves tons of time like that, reading context. Like I have 100 web pages I need to read and I want a summary of those. AI can do that today and it'll give me a summary, it'll give me citations, it'll give me bullets. And if you do it the right way and the smart way, everything is linked back to the real sources and you can validate all those things. Could I have read 100 web pages and process that and write a report? I certainly could have. It would have taken me like a couple days to do. And now we have that capability to do it in 5 minutes, right?
That's, and that to me is a perfect example of what is great about it.
So that's the you're seeing more. You mentioned kind of human resources. There's actually a lot of regulation coming out that, and that world is evolving fast as well. Specifically for human resources of what models are allowed to do. So you're going to start seeing that. It's at the state level now, but several states now have proposed regulation of how you're allowed to use AI in the HR space, and I think that's good.
I
Uh,
do too. I do too.
it's, that's a whole other kind of podcast too of the models themselves and how they're regulated. You just saw Anthropic, their newest frontier model was, banned for a little while by the US government, right? Like
Right.
everything they're
I,
doing. You're seeing now the Chinese models, and even we mentioned Chinese models when we spoke last year, but that is they've there used to be much further behind the frontier tier models. Now with the newest releases, they're like on the doorstep of being on par with the best kind of closed source US models. So having
Wow.
the Chinese models, and they're open weight models, which means like you can run them on if you have a computer powerful enough, you can run them on that computer versus the OpenAI and Anthropic where you need to use their service. That's a big deal. But you're seeing some regulation around that. There was even just a letter that went out signed by all the AI companies that said we need open weight models because they're important for innovation and things like that. But there are real concerns. They're coming out of the Chinese research shops. And even if you could run them on your own computer, you don't have to rely on the Chinese infrastructure. There's concerns of maybe how there's trained inherent bias built in because the models are built on trained on text. So is it trained and it's going to have a bias if it sees a Chinese language article about the Chinese government that's not in another article? That's very real. Or is there something you're not even going to know about it till a certain case? So there's the whole regulatory world around AI is
But
fast.
where do you see the Chinese? This is interesting to me, Chris. Where do you see the Chinese models going? Are they, if they're right close to Anthropic and Claude right now, or the other one and Gemini and all that? Do you see them moving faster in some respects?
So they're the way they're built is they're distilled on the U.S. models. What that essentially means is U.S. models are trained on all this information and they do a lot of work to get the models. A lot of the Chinese models are actually piggybacking on the conversations with the U.S. models and they're distilling those responses to make their models. They do some innovative technical things, but they're able to move faster to get closer to the U.S. models. But they're not going to overtake them because they really rely on the frontier models pushing the frontier, and then they try to
Got it.
distill those models. Having said that, at a certain point, and what's really happened, models are getting better, but at a certain point, they're good enough for a lot of jobs, and we're running into the challenge. It's really hard to benchmark these newer models just because they're very good, right? Like, and then you're a lot of use cases they're more than uh, effective at. So like you start to get to this limit of is this one really better than this one? Well, we have this benchmark, but it's trained on that benchmark. It's starting to really get hard to tell what's better. And at a certain point, it doesn't matter anymore, right? In this case, where I needed to summarize 100 web pages, if it can do that, it doesn't matter if there's the smarter model out. The one that does it works, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and
Right.
that is going to change too, because the other change that we're going to see in the future is models are starting to get faster as well, right? The way they're doing the chips are different. The inference of the models are going to change, and that's going to change our industry. Even if the model capability and reasoning doesn't improve, if imagine like you use all the kind of models, and it takes say a minute to generate that output or whatever it is. Imagine if that was instant, 2,000 tokens a
Right.
second, and you just had that, all of the different things that would enable and capabilities the user interface would be completely different, having instant responses,
Wow.
and that we're getting there. There's models that do that 1,000, 2,000 tokens per second, right? Which is incredibly fast.
Right. But now, I mean, let me just from my own perspective, some of the issues that I also see coming up, and we haven't even explored yet. One of the areas that you're very familiar with, which is third-party risk, and whether you're and now we have to find out how our third parties are using AI. And we better know that when we onboard a third party, because we don't want to have them acting on our behalf, because then they can create liability for us. And so that, even controlling the use of AI within your company, now imagine we're going to go out to our third parties and try to protect ourselves in how those third parties or our third parties are using AI. I mean, doesn't this eventually get so complicated and so many risks on top of other risks? You really, the ranking process and what you're going to focus on is absolutely critical right now.
Yeah, I see that from the vendor side, right? As an AI company, we go through vendor onboarding with all our clients, and they all use third-party risk management platforms and vendor risk management platforms. So they all now have questionnaires about how does your organization use AI, and we have to answer additional questions and things like that. Um,
And they have to include it now in your contracts, there
Oh yeah.
has to be provisions now to protect your company, or if you use a vendor and they're using AI to protect you from their use of AI. So it's cascading, as the word you used earlier. It is cascading in terms of the level of risk that we're all facing with this new technology.
The the interesting thing is just how fast it's moving, right? Because even
Yeah,
in this case, we answer all these things, and in our case, we're a smaller company. We understand exactly how we're using AI. We're an AI first company, and really we have it dialed in. But to your point about that company earlier, right? Half the employees are using AI, nobody even knows. It's like
right,
we go through these exercises. Does it actually make a difference, right, for anybody? And then even if you have it in the agreement that they're not going to use AI, and then the person uses it on their shift, it's just like this fast moving space that's people are trying to put things in place, but does it actually make a difference, or is it controllable? I don't know at this point. It seems like
yeah.
it's not, right. It seems like we
It seems like it's not, and I do think. Look, the EU is, again in the lead on regulation here, but I think the states are eventually going to have to get involved. And I'm not sure the feds. Look, the feds haven't even gotten a basic data privacy law in place. Can they get an AI type of framework built? I don't think they can, but we'll see. I mean, the problem is the states are going to do a lot of stuff here, like you said already in the HR area.
as a practitioner, that's fear though is there's some kind of regulatory capture from the bigger shops, like the frontier AI shops, and that's what they want, right? Even on even the Chinese models, the CEO of Anthropic just came out and said, open weight models are, I don't have a problem with them, but we shouldn't give these chips to China, right? The most advanced chips.
Right.
We shouldn't allow distillation of our models by these things. I mean, it's kind of self-serving when you come out with all these things that are
Right. Right.
your company. But my fear as a smaller company who is innovative is the regulation hurts growth all for everyone except for the companies who have billions of dollars,
That's right. That's
and that
right.
is a real concern of mine. So it's like kind of this balancing act, right? There should be regulation on some things. It shouldn't be used for other things. There's some of the like labeling AI tax, not using it for certain use cases. That's really important. But at the same time, I am concerned that you have this kind of regulatory effect that you can't innovate unless you have $1 billion that you just raised.
Right. Right. And I think that there's always the risk of regulatory capture. That they capture the regulators somehow, the larger companies, and then the innovative companies like yourself through the years is just there's not going to be as much room for you guys.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but I think it would all be much better, Chris, if you ran it all. Okay, I mean, I'll put you at the top and let you run it, and I think things would be a lot better, and I feel a lot more comfortable with where we're going, because I think you have a unique sort of perspective of balancing here, balancing efficiencies and balancing the use, and fully recognizing that there are potential risks in terms of that.
And I mean, we do AI at very high scale with our customers. I think last month we did about 5,000 kind of research reports for our clients, or 5 million
Yeah,
research reports for our clients. So we're doing this. We have to have really tight parameters for how we process it, how we consider it, because we're doing it not once or twice. We're doing it against dozens of
yeah,
customers at very high volume. So we have to kind of have a very narrow scope of how it works. And it has to be consistent, right? It can't be different from
yeah.
here to there, right? And a lot of times they use consumer tools like people can run things however they want, and it might work this time, but it might not work that time. So we have to kind of have that rigor around our process and how we build things.
Well, let me just thanks again. I'm sorry to take so much of your time, but this was really a fascinating discussion. Chris, if people want to reach you, the best way to reach you is
So you go to our website, which is threat.digital, no .com, just threat.digital, or Christian Focacci on LinkedIn. There's only one of me. Feel free to connect anytime, and I'm happy to talk about any of this stuff.
And let me just say this: I thank you for the work that you do. Your product is absolutely fantastic, and we're big believers in it and big users of it. And I'd urge people to take a look at Threat Digital. It's a great service. So we'll check back with you. Hopefully, we'll still be here and we won't be replaced by AI for the next discussion. If that's true, I'll try to get better looking AI agent for myself. Okay, but it's good to talk to you, Chris, and stay in touch and keep up the amazing work. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.